Marcus Webb has been riding solo for 17 years, ever since the day he walked away from the iron-bound crew and everything it stood for. A mechanic by trade, a ghost by choice, he lives above his garage in a small Pennsylvania town, fixing other people's bikes while his own Harley collects dust in the back room. He's made peace with silence. Then a 10-year-old boy named Tommy shows up at his garage door on a Tuesday morning, barefoot and bruised, running from a father who stopped being a father years ago. Marcus knows he should call social services. He knows the rules. But when Tommy asks him a simple question, "Can you teach me how to fix things?" something cracks inside the old biker's chest. A promise made in a moment of weakness becomes the thread that unravels everything, because helping one boy means standing against a system that failed him. It means calling in favors from men Marcus swore he'd never see again. It means the iron-bound crew, the family he left behind, will have to ride one more time. By the final sunrise, 63 bikers will have gathered at Marcus's garage. Not for violence, for something heavier. The promise that some bonds never break and some debts to honor are written in blood and loyalty, not paper. This is a story about a man who gave everything up to stay clean until one boy made him remember why he was ever worth saving in the first place. If you could choose the moment your life breaks open again, you'd never choose it. But the universe doesn't ask permission. The garage smelled like it always did. Motor oil, welding heat, and the ghost of 1,000 engines brought back from the dead. Marcus Webb didn't look up when the bell above the door chimed at 6:47 in the morning. Early customers were rare. Early customers with real money were rarer still. Early customers who needed his specific kind of discretion didn't exist anymore, and he'd made peace with that years ago. He was elbow-deep in a 1987 Springer, rebuilding the carburetor with hands that moved like muscle memory. Precise, patient, indifferent. The radio played low country on the workbench. The coffee in his mug had gone cold 2 hours ago. This was the rhythm. Arrive before dawn, work until noon, close by 5, drink whiskey alone above the garage, repeat. The silence broke when the boy spoke. "Are you Marcus Webb?" Marcus set down his wrench without rushing. He was a man who did nothing fast anymore. Slow movements meant controlled reactions. Controlled reactions meant nobody got hurt. He turned on his stool, wiping his hands on a rag already black from 2 decades of stains. The kid couldn't have been more than 10. Dark hair, darker eyes, and a face that had learned fear before it learned to smile. His t-shirt was 3 sizes too big. His jeans were held up with twine. One of his feet was wrapped in what looked like a grocery bag, taped with duct tape. Marcus had seen a lot of things in his life. He'd seen men betray each other for gas money. He'd seen loyalty mean nothing when bullets entered the conversation. He'd seen families destroy themselves from the inside out. But he'd never seen a kid in this particular shade of terrified standing in his garage at dawn. "Who's asking?" Marcus said quietly. "My name's Tommy Reeves. My mom used to work at the diner on 5th. You used to come in," she said. The boy swallowed hard. "She said if anything ever happened to her, if I was ever in trouble, I should find you. She said you were a good man. She said you'd help." The coffee mug slipped from Marcus's fingers and shattered against the concrete floor. He didn't remember dropping it. "Your mother," he said slowly. "She have red hair? Irish accent?" "She's dead," Tommy said, and the words came out flat, rehearsed, the way kids talk about things too big to feel anymore. "Car accident, 3 months ago. I've been with my dad since then, but he—" The boy looked down at his grocery bag foot. "He says I'm not his problem. He says I'm my mother's mistake. Last night he told me to get out and not come back. So I walked. I walked for a long time. I remembered the name on the sign you have in town, Webb's Garage. I found it." Marcus felt something in his chest that he'd spent 17 years teaching himself not to feel. Recognition. Responsibility. The weight of a promise he'd made to a woman named Sarah Reeves in a parking lot outside a diner in 2008, both of them knowing the world was too sharp and she wouldn't last long in it. "If anything ever happens," she'd whispered, pressing a mechanic's receipt with his name and address into Tommy's baby hand, "you tell him I said he owed me a promise. You tell him Marcus Webb keeps his word." He'd said yes because she was dying and he was still young enough to believe promises mattered. Then she died, exactly the way she'd always been afraid she would. Fast, stupid, unfair. And he'd spent 3 years watching a baby grow into a kid with her eyes, waiting for the day this moment would come. He'd always known it would come. "Okay," Marcus said, and his voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere very far away. "Okay, Tommy, you're going to sit down right there. Don't touch anything. I'm going to make you breakfast. Then we're going to figure out what comes next." The boy sat down on a paint-stained stool like his legs had forgotten how to hold him up. Marcus moved toward the back stairs that led to his apartment, muscle memory taking over where thought had failed. He'd spent 17 years building a life small enough that nothing could break it. Small enough that he could control every variable. Small enough that he'd convinced himself he was finally safe. One boy with his mother's eyes had just destroyed all of that in under 2 minutes. And Marcus Webb, old enough to know better but not strong enough to refuse, was already calculating who he would have to call, which promises from his old life he would have to cash, which men he'd sworn he'd never see again would have to stand beside him before this was finished, because the boy was right. Sarah Reeves had been a good woman in a hard life, and Marcus Webb kept his word, even when it cost everything. Sometimes a choice isn't really a choice. Sometimes it's just the moment you finally admit what you've always known. The apartment above the garage was sparse in the way of men who owned nothing they couldn't leave behind in 20 minutes. A bed, a table, a kitchen that hadn't seen serious cooking in a decade. The refrigerator held beer, cold cuts, and condiments. The dietary toolkit of someone who'd forgotten how to live for anything but efficiency. Marcus made scrambled eggs and toast. He poured orange juice into a glass that still had the price sticker on it. Tommy ate like he was afraid the food would disappear mid-bite, like every forkful had to be secured and swallowed before anyone could take it back. He didn't speak. Neither did Marcus. When Tommy finished, Marcus ran bathwater and found clothes from a box marked "Donation" that had never made it to the shelter. They hung loose on the kid's frame, but they were clean. While Tommy showered, Marcus sat on the edge of the tub with the door cracked open and made a phone call on a number he hadn't dialed in 9 years. "Harden," a voice answered. Not surprised. Harden's voice never carried surprise. It carried the sound of a man who'd anticipated every possible future and decided none of them were worth his concern. "It's Webb." A pause. The kind of pause that meant Harden was running calculations, updating files, reassessing the landscape of his known world. "You're calling the Ironbound crew for the first time in a decade," Harden said finally. "That's either a very big emergency or a very stupid mistake. Which is it? The Reeves kid showed up at my garage this morning. Sarah's boy, 10 years old. Father threw him out yesterday." Another pause, longer this time. "I remember Sarah," Harden said quietly. "Good woman, didn't deserve what she got." "No, she didn't. I made her a promise, Harden, a long time ago. The kid came to me. So now I'm calling you. Webb." Harden's voice carried a warning now. "You walked away. You said you were done. You said you couldn't be part of it anymore. That was your choice, and we respected it. But you can't come back from the cold just because a kid shows up. That's not how this works." "I'm not asking to come back," Marcus said carefully. "I'm asking for help. Child Services will take him into the system. Foster care in this county is not my problem." "I know." Marcus listened to Tommy turning off the shower, wringing out a washcloth. "But it's mine, and I'm asking, one more time. Help me keep this kid safe. Help me get him set up somewhere, and then I'll walk away again, cleaner this time. For good." Hardin didn't answer for a long moment. When he did, his voice had shifted into something older, something that sounded almost like grief. "You know what the problem with honor is, Webb. It's that it never actually closes the door. It just leaves it open, waiting for you to remember what you left behind. I told the crew you were done. I told them you'd made your choice and we had to respect it. But they never believed it. Not really. They kept waiting for you to change your mind, to remember that family doesn't work that way. This isn't about coming back, Hardin. This is about one kid. There's no such thing as just one kid in a life like ours," Hardin said. "There's only the moment when you stop running from who you are. Sounds like that moment just arrived at your garage door." He paused. "I'll come by tonight. We'll talk about what we can do. But Webb, once you do this, once you start pulling strings again, you need to understand something. The ironbound crew doesn't forget loyalty, and we don't forget debts. You're about to build yourself back into our history. You understand that?" "I understand." "Do you? Because I don't think you do. I think you're thinking about a kid's safety. I think you're not thinking about the machinery you're about to restart. But you'll learn. You always do." Hardin hung up without saying goodbye. Marcus set the phone down as Tommy emerged from the bathroom, drowning in clothes that belonged to a larger man. The kid's hair was wet and darker than before. His eyes were red from crying in the shower, the kind of crying kids do when they think no one can hear them, the kind of crying that breaks something inside a man who spent 17 years not feeling. "I have a place where you can stay," Marcus said. "People I know. They'll take care of you until we figure out something permanent." "Are you keeping me?" Tommy asked. Marcus couldn't answer that. He didn't have the words for what was about to happen, the machinery that was turning to life in the background of his careful, controlled existence. He could only tell the truth. "I'm keeping my promise," Marcus said. "Your mother asked me to, so yes, in every way that matters, I'm keeping you. There are moments when the universe asks you to choose between who you were and who you pretended to become. Those moments always arrive when you're least prepared to answer them." Hardin showed up at 8 p.m. with 3 other men, Graves, Cole, and Santiago. They moved through the garage like smoke, assessing. They shook hands with Tommy like he was a dignity they owed to Sarah's memory. They looked at Marcus with expressions he couldn't quite read. Disappointment, recognition, sadness. All of it mixed together into the complicated silence of men who'd once stood shoulder to shoulder and now stood separated by choices that couldn't be unmade. "The kid can't stay with us," Hardin said, drinking coffee Marcus had made without being asked. "The clubhouse isn't set up for children, but we have a safe house, used to be for members' families. It's been empty for 6 years. We'll get it ready. Food, clothes, school set up. He can stay there for as long as he needs." "I need to thank you," Marcus started. "You don't thank family," Graves interrupted. He was scarred across his left side from a fire that had nothing to do with accidents. "You just remember that they were there when you needed them, even after you left." "I never left the family," Marcus said quietly. "I just left the work." "Same thing," Cole said. He was younger than Marcus, maybe 40, with the kind of restless energy that meant he still believed violence could solve problems. "You can't be half in. You know that. You taught me that." "Oh, things are different now." "No, they're not," Hardin said. "That's the thing you never understood. Things are always the same. The names change, the faces change, the reasons we ride change. But the core, the loyalty, the code, the absolute certainty that we protect our own, that never changes, that's written in blood." Marcus knew Hardin was right. He'd known it the moment Tommy showed up at the garage door. He'd known it when he'd made the phone call. He'd known it every moment of the 9 years he'd spent pretending otherwise. "Take him somewhere tonight," Marcus said. "Somewhere safe. I need to put some things in order here. I need to make arrangements, protect what I can protect." "And if the father comes looking?" Santiago asked. He was the oldest of them, with grey threading through his beard and the kind of calm that came from having survived things that should have killed him. "Let me know," Marcus said. "I'll handle it." The men exchanged glances. Hardin nodded slowly. "There he is," Graves said, but not unkindly. "There's the Marcus Webb I remember. Dune. They took Tommy in a blue sedan that was nothing like the trucks they usually drove. The kid looked back once at Marcus as they pulled away, his eyes asking questions Marcus couldn't answer in words. Just a small nod. A confirmation that this was the right path, even though they both knew how wrong everything about it was. When they were gone, Marcus went to the back room and uncovered the Harley he hadn't ridden in 17 years, a 1995 Fat Boy, midnight black with chrome that caught the fluorescent light like captured stars. He ran his hand across the seat. The leather was dry but whole. The engine was cold but complete. He sat on it for an hour without turning the key. Just sat there in the dark, remembering what it had felt like to be part of something bigger than himself, to have brothers, to have purpose, to be a man who could walk into a room and people understood that his word was law, that his loyalty was absolute, that his silence meant protection and his anger meant consequences. He'd given all of that up because he'd watched it destroy people. Because he'd watched it turn good men into monsters. Because he'd realized one day that he couldn't tell anymore where the line was between protecting family and hurting the innocent. But he'd also spent 17 years pretending that walking away meant the choice didn't matter anymore, that the skills didn't live in his hands, that the weight of old promises didn't press against his chest every single day. A 10-year-old boy with his dead mother's eyes had just reminded him that some promises don't expire. They just wait for the moment you're strong enough to keep them. Marcus turned the key. The engine roared to life like it had never stopped, like 17 years was just a breath held underwater, waiting for him to surface. If you're watching this, and you know what it means when a man gets back on his bike after all this time, you already understand what comes next. The past doesn't stay buried. It just waits for the right moment to ride. Sometimes mercy looks like violence. And sometimes the most dangerous man in a room is the one who finally stopped pretending to be harmless. The father's name was Derek Reeves, and he ran a used car lot on the highway outside town. Marcus found him at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday, alone in the office, counting cash into neat stacks while country music played on a tinny radio. Derek was thin in the way men get when they're more comfortable with drinking than eating. He had Tommy's nose, but none of his mother's kindness. The kindness had skipped a generation, like a defective gene. Marcus didn't speak. He just closed the office door and locked it from the inside. "I'm not carrying much," Derek said, not looking up. "Maybe $60 in the register. Everything else is in the safe, and you're not getting into that without the combination." "I'm not here for money," Marcus said. Derek looked up then, and recognition flickered across his face. It was the kind of recognition that meant Derek had heard stories about the garage owner who used to run with the iron-bound crew, the kind that made a man's nervous system remember that some predators wore human skin just like you did. "Oh," Derek said and tried to stand up. Marcus didn't let him. "Your son came to my garage 3 days ago," Marcus said. "Barefoot, hungry, terrified. You put him out on the street like he was garbage. That kid is not my problem. That marriage was a mistake. He's a reminder of—" Marcus crossed the space between them with the kind of velocity that came from 17 years of controlled violence. He didn't hit Derek. He didn't need to. He just caught him by the throat, pressed him against the wall, and leaned in close enough that Derek could feel the weight of all the years Marcus had spent not doing exactly this. "Your son is nobody's problem now," Marcus said quietly, "because he's under my protection. And I want you to understand something, Derek. I want you to be very clear on this. If you ever try to contact him, if you ever try to claim him, if you ever make any effort to reclaim custody, I won't go to lawyers. I won't go to courts. Do you understand me?" Derek was gasping for air, his face going purple. "I'll come back here," Marcus continued, his voice steady as stone. "And we'll have a very different conversation. The kind of conversation where you won't be able to call the police because you'll be too busy trying to remember why breathing matters. You understand?" Marcus released him. Derek collapsed into his chair, choking, one hand at his throat. "Tommy is gone," Marcus said. "He's safe. He's being raised by people who can give him what you never could. And as far as you're concerned, he's dead. He doesn't exist anymore. You'll never mention him. You'll never look for him. And if I ever hear that you've tried to do either of those things, I'll make sure you don't get a second warning. Clear?" Derek nodded, still gasping. "Good," Marcus said, and headed for the door. "Wait," Derek managed. "Why? Why do you care? He's not your kid." Marcus stopped with his hand on the door. "Because his mother asked me to," Marcus said. "Because his mother was worth more in her pinky finger than you'll ever be in your entire pathetic life. Because I made a promise. And because some men are built to keep their word, and some men are built to break their children. You're the second kind, Derek. Don't make me prove I'm the first." He drove the fat boy back to the garage with the night wind pushing against his chest like a physical thing. He rode past the safe house where Tommy was sleeping. He didn't stop, didn't announce his presence, just passed by like a ghost, confirming something still existed. The ironbound crew was already assembling. Hardin had made calls. The calls had made other calls. By the next morning, there would be 14 bikes parked outside the garage. By the following week, there would be twice that many. Not because the crew was gathering for war, they weren't, but because the message had gone out, and that message was simple. Marcus Webb is keeping a promise. If you rode with him once, you ride with him now. Marcus wasn't asking for this. But he'd learned a long time ago that some things don't ask permission. They just show up at your door, barefoot and terrified, and ask if you're the kind of man who keeps his word. He'd spent 17 years proving he wasn't. It was time to prove he was. When a man asks his brothers to ride, every motorcycle engine that fires up is a prayer made manifest. Every rider who shows up is a debt paid forward. By dawn, the landscape changes. The bikes started arriving on Friday morning. Marcus hadn't announced anything. Hardin had made the calls. Hardin's calls reached out to 8 chapters across 4 states: Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Atlantic City, Baltimore. Each chapter had brothers who'd ridden with Marcus once, or fought beside someone Marcus had fought beside, or owed a debt to the mythology of the ironbound crew. And each of those brothers understood that when the oldest among them asked, there was only one answer. By noon, there were 37 bikes lined up outside the garage. They came from different chapters, different years, different eras of the organization's history. Some Marcus recognized. Some he didn't. They all wore the same patch, the ironbound fist on a crimson background, and they all had the same expression. Quiet respect mixed with something that looked like relief. The expression of men who'd been waiting for their brother to remember what it meant to be a brother. Hardin stood in the garage, watching Marcus work. They'd been standing like that for hours, not speaking, just existing in the comfortable silence of men who didn't need words. Behind them, the open garage door framed the assembled machinery. Chrome catching sunlight, tires that had traveled 1,000 miles each, the kind of bikes that only men who'd made specific choices about their lives would ride. "He's settled in," Hardin said finally. "The safe house has everything he needs. School is set up. We've got people watching, making sure nobody comes looking." "Good. There's a lawyer. Her name is Elizabeth Chen. She handles adoptions for us, custody transfers, that kind of thing. She can expedite the paperwork, make it so the kid is legally yours. No social services involvement, completely clean. Marcus stopped working and looked at Hardin directly. "That's not legal," Marcus said. "No," Hardin agreed. "It's not. But it's what we do. It's how we protect the people who can't protect themselves. You taught me that, Webb. You taught me that sometimes the law and justice are two different things, and a man has to choose which one he's going to serve. So what's it going to be?" Marcus thought about Tommy's face when he was eating breakfast in the apartment. The way the kid had looked at him like Marcus was the first solid thing he'd found in a world that kept collapsing. He thought about Sarah Reeves, dead for 3 months, leaving behind a son she couldn't protect. He thought about all the ways the system was built to swallow kids like Tommy and spit them back out broken. "Do it," Marcus said. "Whatever Chen needs, make it happen." Hardin nodded like that was the answer he'd been expecting all along. "There's something else," Hardin said. "The father, Derek. He contacted someone, a lawyer. He's claiming the kid was taken from his custody illegally. He's threatening to involve the police." "Let him," Marcus said. "Let him bring everything he's got. I don't care anymore." "That's not the Marcus Webb I knew." Hardin's voice carried amusement now. "The Marcus Webb I knew cared very much about the police." "The Marcus Webb you knew was trying to be something he wasn't," Marcus said. "I'm done trying. If Derek wants to play this game, we'll play it his way. But he needs to understand that he's playing against an organization of bikers with lawyers, connections, and absolutely nothing to lose. Tell Chen to find every violation of custody law, every financial crime, every assault charge she can find on Derek Reeves. Build a file. Make sure that if he tries to claim Tommy, we have enough to bury him." "Now we're cooking," Cole said from the corner of the garage. He'd been listening the whole time, cleaning his bike with the kind of meditation that only came with years of riding. "Welcome home, brother." Marcus didn't correct him, because Cole was right. Somewhere in the hours since Tommy had shown up at his door, somewhere between the phone call to Hardin and the moment he'd started the Fat Boy's engine, Marcus had stopped running. He'd stopped pretending that he was a different man than the one he'd always been. He'd stopped trying to escape the gravity of brotherhood and loyalty that had been pulling at him every single day of the 9 years he'd spent away. He wasn't home, not yet, but he was standing on the threshold, and the door was finally opening. By sunset, there were 53 bikes in the parking lot. Sometimes the most important moments in a life happen quietly, without witnesses or fanfare. Just two people understanding each other at a level that doesn't require words. Marcus brought Tommy back to the garage on Saturday morning. The kid had been asking to see him, had been asking questions about where he was going, who was taking care of him. Hardin had told Marcus it was time for Tommy to see what he'd been brought into. Time for the kid to understand that there was a price to this protection, and the price was being tethered to a world that operated on different rules than the one most children inhabited. The bikes were parked in a semicircle around the garage, a metal church waiting for prayer. The bikers were everywhere, on the steps, against the walls, inside the garage working on machines or just talking. They looked dangerous until you noticed they weren't. They were just men, old men, young men, scarred men, men with stories written across their skin in tattoos and experience. But when Tommy walked in holding Marcus's hand, every single one of them became something else, protective, careful, gentle. Hardin knelt down so he was eye level with Tommy. "Your mom was a good woman," Hardin said. "I knew her. Not well, but I knew her. She used to come into the diner sometimes, and she'd always ask about Marcus. She'd ask if he was happy. She was worried about him, you know? She didn't like that he was alone." Tommy listened without speaking. "She was the kind of person who understood something important," Hardin continued. "She understood that family isn't something you're born with. Family is something you choose. It's people who decide they're going to stand beside you no matter what. And your mom, she chose Marcus. She asked him to take care of you if anything ever happened, and that means you're family now. That means you're one of us." "Does that mean I have to ride a motorcycle?" Tommy asked, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost like hope. "Eventually," Hardin said, smiling. "But not yet. First you learn, first you understand, first you become a man who knows what his word means. Then, when the time is right, you'll ride with us." Marcus led Tommy over to the back room where the fat boy was parked. The bike looked even larger in the morning light, all chrome and black leather, and the kind of presence that commanded respect without saying a word. "Your mom asked me to teach you something," Marcus said. "She asked me to teach you how to fix things, how to take something broken and make it whole again. She said that was the most important skill a man could have." "Can I touch it?" Tommy asked, looking at the fat boy like it was a holy object. "Yeah," Marcus said. "You can. Here." He guided Tommy's small hand to the handlebars. "This is called the grip. This is where your hands go when you're riding. Feel how it's shaped? That's so your hand won't slip. That's so you stay in control even when things get rough." They spent the next 3 hours in the garage. Marcus showed Tommy how an engine worked, how fuel flowed into pistons, how the spark plugs fired, how the whole massive machine was really just thousands of individual pieces working together in perfect synchronization. He showed him the carburetor, the transmission, the differential. He showed him that everything that looked impossible could be understood if you broke it down into pieces you could comprehend. Around them, the bikers worked on their own machines or just sat and watched. Nobody tried to rush them. Nobody tried to make Tommy feel small or out of place. They just let the kid work, let him learn, let him become part of the rhythm of the garage. At the end of the day, Marcus showed Tommy the challenge his mother had prepared years before, the one Marcus had been saving for this moment. "I'm going to show you how to start an engine," Marcus said. "I'm going to teach you every step. And when you understand how all the pieces work together, I'm going to let you try. And if you can start this engine, if you can take everything you've learned and make it work, then this bike is yours someday. When you're old enough, when you're ready, this fat boy belongs to you." Tommy's eyes went wide. "Really? Really?" Marcus said. "But only if you do the work. Only if you learn, only if you understand that motorcycles aren't toys. They're freedom. They're trust. They're a promise between a man and the machine. You ready to learn that?" Tommy nodded so hard Marcus thought his neck might break. As the sun set over the garage, Marcus walked Tommy through every step. The ignition switch, the fuel pump prime, the choke position, the starter button. With his hand over Tommy's, he showed the kid how to coordinate all of it. How to bring the machine to life with intention and respect. "Now," Marcus said, "you try. You do exactly what I showed you." Tommy's small hands trembled as he reached for the ignition switch. He turned it to the on position. He checked the choke. He took a breath. He pressed the starter button. The engine roared to life, and Tommy's face transformed into pure joy. It was the kind of joy that only comes when a kid realizes he's capable of something that seemed impossible. It was the kind of joy that meant healing had started, like this video. Share it with someone who understands that a man's word is his legacy, and his loyalty is his religion. And if you've ever been broken down to nothing, you know exactly what it feels like when someone believes in you again. Sometimes the most powerful things we leave behind aren't written in stone. They're written in the kind of love that refuses to be erased by time or death. 2 weeks after Tommy started the Fat Boy's engine, a letter arrived at the garage addressed to Marcus Webb. It had no return address, just his name written in careful script on an envelope that looked like it had been waiting a very long time to be delivered. Inside was a handwritten note and a photograph. The photograph showed Sarah Reeves and Marcus from 15 years ago. They were standing outside the diner, both smiling, both looking like people who still believed the world had room for people like them. In the background, you could see a tiny Tommy in his mother's arms, just a baby, not yet aware of all the ways the world would try to break him. The note read, "Marcus, if you're reading this, then it means I'm gone, and you're looking at our son. I don't know how long it took for him to find you. I don't know if you'd already moved on and built a life without us. But I'm writing this anyway, because I need you to know something. I always knew you were a good man, not because you were a perfect man. I knew about the things you'd done, the choices you'd made, the brotherhood you were part of. I knew all of that. But I also knew something the world didn't know about you. I knew that underneath everything hard, everything dangerous, everything that scared people away, there was a man who kept his promises, a man who couldn't walk away from someone who needed him. I'm writing this as an insurance policy. I'm writing this because I have a terrible feeling about the road ahead, and I want you to know that if it comes true, if I'm not here to raise our son, then I need you to be. Not as an obligation, as a gift. Because Tommy is the best thing I ever made, and he deserves to know a man who stands for something. He deserves to know you. I know you left the life. I know you're trying to be something different. I respect that. But don't give up on that part of you that knows how to love fiercely and protect absolutely. That part of you is what Tommy needs. That part of you is what the world needs. Keep your promises, Marcus. Keep them to him. And know that every time you do, every time you show him what it means to be a man of honor, you're keeping a promise to me, too. Sarah P.S. There's a motorcycle in a storage unit in Harrisburg under the name Mitchell. Key is taped to the back of this letter. I was saving it for Tommy's 21st birthday. Sell it if you need to. Keep it if you want to. But I think you'll know what to do with it. Marcus read the letter 3 times. He didn't cry. Marcus Webb had stopped crying a long time ago, but he felt something move inside his chest, something that had been frozen for years, something that was finally starting to thaw. Hardin found him reading it for the 4th time. "Sarah," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "Found it in her safety deposit box," Hardin said quietly. "Been waiting for you. Wanted to make sure you and the kid were on solid ground before we delivered it. Thought it was what Sarah would have wanted." "There's a motorcycle," Marcus said. "I know. I already had Chen check on the storage unit. Bike's beautiful. 2003, Harley. Sarah must have been saving for years." Hardin sat down on a workbench. "She was something special, Webb. She understood things a lot of women don't understand. She understood that the men we are in the club and the men we are when we love someone, those things don't have to be contradictions. Those things can exist together." "I wasn't with her," Marcus said. "I mean, not like that. It wasn't—" "I know," Hardin interrupted. "Sarah explained it to us. She said you gave her the best gift a man like you could give her. You gave her honesty. You told her you couldn't be the man she deserved, but you could be the man her son needed. And she said that was enough. She said that was everything." Marcus folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket. "Tell Tommy," Marcus said. "Tell him about his mother. Tell him the story of who she was. He needs to know. Before he's old enough to make his own choices about all of this, before he decides if he's staying with us or walking away, he needs to understand the woman who brought him into the world. He needs to know that she chose us, that she chose me, that she was part of this family before he was." "I'll make sure he knows," Hardin said. Marcus walked out to the garage, where Tommy was sitting on the fat boy, pretending to drive, his small hands gripping the handlebars while he made engine sounds with his mouth. The other bikers were watching him with the kind of gentleness that only came from men who understood what it meant to be saved by someone else's promise. "Hey, Tommy," Marcus said, "come here. I want to teach you something." The kid scrambled off the bike and ran to Marcus. "Your mom left us something," Marcus said. "It's a motorcycle. It's been waiting for you for a very long time. But before we go get it, I want to tell you about the woman who saved it. I want to tell you about Sarah Reeves and why she matters and why her promise is the reason you're here." Tommy listened as Marcus told him the story. The story of a woman brave enough to love a man who was still learning how to be worthy of love. The story of a mother who prepared for every possible future because she understood that the world was fragile and precious and demanded protection. The story of a promise made in a parking lot outside a diner, whispered to a baby who wouldn't remember the words but would spend his life living out their meaning. By the time Marcus finished, the sun was setting over the garage. The bikes were lined up like a guard of honor. The bikers were standing in small clusters, quiet and respectful, bearing witness to the moment a boy truly understood what family meant. "Will I ride like you?" Tommy asked. "If you want to," Marcus said. "If you choose to, that's your decision to make. But I think you will. I think you have your mother's bravery in you. I think you have her strength. And I think someday, when you're old enough, you'll understand why some men ride, why some men choose loyalty and brotherhood and the open road as a way of life. You'll understand because it's in your blood." "Will you teach me?" Tommy asked. "Every single day," Marcus promised, "until you don't need me to anymore. Until you're old enough to teach the next kid who shows up at my door. That's how this works. That's how family works. The ending isn't a conclusion. It's a beginning. It's the moment when a man looks at the life he built and finally understands that he built it exactly right all along." 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in April, 63 motorcycles rolled through the streets of the small Pennsylvania town. They came from 8 different chapters. They came from 4 different states. They came because Marcus Webb had asked them to come, not for violence, not for trouble, but for something heavier and more important. They came to bear witness to a promise kept. The courthouse was small and quiet. The judge was a woman named Richardson, who'd been working with Elizabeth Chen for 3 years to build a case so airtight that Derek Reeves never stood a chance. The files Chen had compiled contained everything: financial fraud, 3 separate assault allegations from previous girlfriends, enough custody violations to fill a courthouse folder. When Derek's lawyer had seen what was coming, they'd withdrawn the case within an hour. The adoption was finalized at 10:47 a.m. Tommy Webb, legally and forever Tommy Webb now, not Tommy Reeves, walked out of the courthouse holding Marcus's hand. The bikers formed a corridor on both sides of the courthouse steps, a pathway of leather and chrome, and the kind of loyalty that could only be understood by people who'd built their lives around it. When Marcus and Tommy reached the street, the bikers started their engines. 63 motorcycles roared to life simultaneously. It was a sound like thunder, like prayer, like the voice of the earth itself rising up to acknowledge that a promise had been kept. The sound echoed off the buildings. People came to windows. Parents held their children close, moved by something they didn't quite understand, but recognized as sacred. Marcus lifted Tommy onto the fat boy, positioned him carefully between the handlebars, wrapped one arm around the kid while keeping his other hand steady on the throttle. Around them, the procession formed. Harden led the first group, followed by Graves, Cole, Santiago, and dozens of others Marcus had ridden with in lifetimes that felt like other people's memories. They rode through the town slowly, not rushing, letting everyone see. They rode past the diner where Sarah had worked, where she'd asked an old biker to keep a promise she knew she wouldn't be alive to ensure herself. They rode past the garage, where it had all started with a boy at the door with his mother's eyes. They rode past the safe house where Tommy had waited, had healed, had learned that the world still contained people worth trusting. And when they reached the highway, Marcus opened up the throttle. The fat boy roared, and behind him 62 other bikes matched the speed, matched the rhythm, matched the intention. They rode out into the spring morning with the sun climbing higher in the sky, with the wind pushing against their chests, with the absolute certainty that some bonds never break and some promises are written in blood and loyalty and the refusal to abandon the people you love. Tommy whooped with pure joy, his small body pressed against Marcus's chest, his small hands gripping the handlebars alongside Marcus's larger hands. He was laughing, and Marcus could feel the vibration of it traveling through both their bodies, down into the machine, out into the world. By sunset, they were at a rest area 50 miles away. The bikers had brought food, sandwiches and beer, and the kind of companionship that only comes from people who've decided they're going to stand beside each other forever. They sat in the grass near the parking area, watching Tommy eat, watching the kid tell stories about his day, watching him understand for the first time what it meant to be loved by a family that had chosen him. Hardin sat next to Marcus. "Sarah would be proud," Hardin said. "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "I think she would be." "You're done running now?" It wasn't a question. Not really. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I'm done running. But I'm not coming back to the old life. This is different. This is bigger than just me and the crew. This is about Tommy. This is about making sure he grows up knowing what it means to be a man of honor. That's my road now." "That's the only road worth traveling," Hardin said, and he put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. It was a gesture of respect, a gesture of brotherhood, a gesture that said all the years of separation had been erased and they were men again. Not enemies, not strangers, not people pretending the other didn't exist. Just brothers, the way they'd been before Marcus tried to pretend that brotherhood didn't matter. As the sun dropped lower, Marcus took Tommy back to the fat boy. He helped the kid up, positioned him carefully, made sure everything was secure. In the darkness, with the highway stretching out ahead of them and the other bikes preparing to follow, Marcus turned to look at the boy. "Ready?" Marcus asked. "For what?" Tommy said. "For everything," Marcus said. "For the ride, for the road, for the life we're building." Tommy nodded, his small face serious and determined, already understanding at 9 years old what it meant to be part of something bigger than himself. Already understanding that some promises last forever, that some bonds are written in the kind of loyalty that can't be broken, that some men are built to keep their word no matter what the cost. Marcus turned the key. The engine roared to life, and behind them 62 other bikes prepared to ride. They headed back into the darkness, a convoy of thunder and light, a family of chosen brothers rolling through the American night. And in the early hours of the morning, when they finally pulled back into the garage, Marcus knew something with absolute certainty. He'd spent 17 years running from who he was. It had taken a 10-year-old boy with his dead mother's eyes to remind him that some parts of ourselves don't disappear just because we stop living them. Some promises don't expire just because we stop speaking them aloud. Some bonds, the ones written in blood and loyalty, and the absolute refusal to abandon the people we love, those bonds survive everything. They survive betrayal and time and the desperate attempts to be someone different. Marcus Webb had finally stopped running. And in stopping, he'd finally found what he'd been searching for all along, a reason to be the man he'd always been, a purpose that made sense of all the hard choices, a second chance at keeping the promises that mattered most. If this story reached you, share it with someone who understands what it means to keep your word. Thank you for riding with us. Subscribe for more stories about the men and women who stand when the world asks them to kneel. We'll see you on the road.